Hi, I'm Casey, and I didn't read a lot of books in December. So for various reasons, I only managed to get in 11 books in December, which, now that I'm saying it out loud, sounds like more than what I thought I read, but I still don't think I didn't feel like I read a lot, but today I want to talk about those, so let's do a wrap up. I DNF'd 2 books in December. One was Sister Song by Lucy Holland. The other was Looking Glass Sound by Catriona Ward. Is it Catriona or Katrina? I don't know. I've heard it both ways in audiobooks. I should have Googled that. I gave no rating to Silencing White Noise by Willie Dwayne Francois III. I had no 1 or 2 stars for the month, so my 3 stars were Eileen by Otessa Moshfegh, Siren Queen by Nevo, Mockingjay by Suzanne Collins, Out There Screaming, an anthology edited by Jordan Peele and John Joseph Adams, and The Liminal Zone by Junji Ito. My 4 stars for the month were How to Pronounce a Knife by Suvankam Thammanvongsa, and The Book of the Unnamed Midwife by Meg Elison. My 5 stars for the month were The 5th Season by N.K. Jemisin, Chlorine by Jade Song, and Watership Down, the graphic novel. On to the superlatives for the month, and we're going to start with the worst. And because I only had 3 stars for the month, this was slightly difficult to decide on, just because everything was at least okay. And I think the most okayest and most not disappointing, but just generally the worst by far of my 3 stars has to go to Mockingjay by Suzanne Collins. This is very disappointing. I love this book. Way back when it came out, I read the entire trilogy in like a week, and I had some negative feelings about Mockingjay, but this is a time when I wasn't reading as critically or really trying to dissect my feelings on books. And now, being a lot older, and this being my first revisit of the series, Mockingjay just doesn't hold up as well. This is the 3rd book in the Hunger Games series. This is following Katniss. Again, I don't like to try to give a synopsis for books in a series because I think it can spoil a lot of what happens. But if you're unfamiliar with this, it's been around for a really long time, and I think a lot of people know what this is about, so I don't necessarily feel like I have to give a synopsis. Overall, I think the drastic tonal shift between books 1 and 2 and this one is just a lot to overcome. Everything is still dark and gritty and depressing, but in the previous 2 games, a lot of that was focused on the struggles in the various districts, and particularly District 12, and particularly the games. That's the main setting for books 1 and 2. And then we are just dropped into a war zone where now Katniss is having to combat a lot of political intrigue, as well as attempting to fight to save her life and the lives of those she loves. And overall, I think it just can't overcome that. I think if book 2 had not focused on the games, I think it could have been easier transition between the 2. But unfortunately, I think that the author just isn't able to strike the right kind of tone. Not in the book in particular. I think the book does a good job of talking about a lot of the political machinations, not really differentiating between various leaders who are trying to be authoritative dictators. I can't think of the word. But it's the fact that we have gone from it being very singularly focused on 2 aspects to now it's huge in scope, and I think that it just doesn't fit in with the previous 2 books very well. Overall, I still found it to be a fine sequel, especially reading it so long later, and I think that there are a lot of things that are very consistent and make sense, but it just didn't strike the right tone with me. And quite frankly, I hate, they're not real love triangles, but 2 guys fighting over one individual, usually a girl in YA dystopia, and it is, I just find it very frustrating to read, especially if one of them is just a totally unlikable asshole like Gale is. Moving on to my most disappointing for the month, and I'm going to give this to Eileen by Otessa Moshfegh. This is a thriller mystery, kind of sort of following Eileen Dunlop, a young woman who's living, I was trying to look if it says what city, who is living in a small town, living with her alcoholic and abusive father, and working at the prison, and just basically struggling in her day-to-day life. She is very unhappy, and she is just kind of a broody 20-something, and then she meets this new woman who comes to town, and she's instantly infatuated and fascinated with her, and then, crazy shit starts to happen. I found this really disappointing. This also was a 3-star. I think this I ended up giving like a 3-star on Goodreads, but it's like technically like a 2.5 on Storygraph because they let you be a lot more granular about it. But I really thought I was gonna love this. I hear so much about Ottessa Moshfegh's writing, and in particular for this book, I hear a lot of people, or I see a lot of people say that they like don't necessarily jive with her other works, but they read this first and they couldn't get over how much they loved it. And now I'm very hesitant to read anything else from this author because I didn't really care for this. I didn't like Eileen. I found her to be like, as much as I love an unlikable protagonist, I just didn't like Eileen. I found her to be very tedious to read about and to read from the perspective of that. I don't think that sentence entirely made sense, but hopefully you understand what I'm saying. And I found it to just overall be extremely slow paced. And this like short little like 260 page book felt like a 400 page book. It took me so long to get through, and I was not having a great time with it, and overall I just found that very disappointing, especially because I really wanted this to just go better. Moving on to my most meh for the month, and that is going to go to The Liminal Zone by Junji Ito. This is a not a short story collection, but it's like a short manga collection from this author, and this is probably my last hurrah with this author, even though I've previously loved their work. Mostly this, I still love Junji Ito's art style, but his storytelling for me has just, once I start noticing things, I can't stop noticing them. So I'm a little over, you know, the stories where young women are the protagonist, but older women are just angry that other women are younger. It's it's weird, especially from written from a man's perspective. It just ends up feeling a little bit off to me, and I didn't find any other stories compelling. So this is my most meh. Moving on to my most surprising for the month, and I'm going to go ahead and give this to Chlorine by Jade Song. This is a horror following Ren, a young woman who is really just struggling. She is having a hard time. She is in high school. She is in competitive swimming, and this is a story a lot of abuse in competitive sports, especially for young people. She's dealing with an abusive coach and an inappropriate coach. Both of them are the same coach. Her own expectations on herself, her expectations academically as well, expectations of being the first generation daughter of 2 immigrants, dealing with these struggles of not having both of her parents there because her father has gone back to China to make more money to send to his family. It is heartbreaking and is devastating. And overall, I just found this so compelling. I had seen a lot of people talk about it, and I had seen a lot of people say that they love it. And for some reason, I just had it in my mind that this was just gonna be okay for me. And in fact, it is just incredible. I think it's got it's not gruesome body horror, but the body horror in here physically made me shudder when I was reading it because I feel like it is so realistic, and the descriptions just, when I think about it, I get the creepy crawlies down my back, and it is devastating. It is just I think I said in my Goodreads review that it is a tidal wave of abuse, heartbreak, and misery, and I loved it, and that's accurate. That's accurate. I was extremely surprised at how much I just love this book and how much I think about it all the time, even though I read it a few weeks ago. Moving on to my best for the month, and my best nonfiction is the only nonfiction I read this month, and it's Silencing White Noise. This is a nonfiction specifically from this pastor's perspective, talking about what he feels white noise is and the ways in which he thinks that we should attempt to combat it in our day-to-day lives. I grabbed this book. I have a story, a very small, not interesting story with this book, and it's that I was really searching for a nonfiction book to finish out the buzzword reading challenge because I was trying to read a fiction, a nonfiction for every prompt every month. And I didn't have one that was on my radar. And so just scrolling through Libby with various words, I found this one, and then I found that it was from Christian Media. And while there's nothing inherently wrong with that, I'm not a religious person, and I was very afraid that I wasn't going to connect very well with this book, and that there was just going to be a massive disconnect between the writing and between my brain. And I was very pleasantly surprised by this. I really enjoyed it. I didn't give it a star rating on Goodreads because I found that there are just times where trying to put down your thoughts in a little, quick numerical ranking system doesn't really translate very well. And that's how I felt about this book. While it wasn't perfect for me, it was really impactful and I think very interesting, but also extremely informative. And this not only talked about how people should just live in their day-to-day lives in reference to racism with their religion, but also just in general had a lot of really good information about the ways in which that was bad English. The ways in which you should engage with the world and you should be paying attention to white noise and to the noise of racism. And I found it really good. I really enjoyed it. I listened to this over the course of a couple of days while I was wrapping my gifts, and it was a great time. I had a great time with it, and I think it was just extremely impactful. Moving on to my best fiction for the month, and I'm going to give this to The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. I don't think this should be a surprise because I already talked about Chlorine, and Watership Down is technically a reread for me, so I'm not including it here, although I really want to because it was my favorite thing I read this month. But this was incredible. I am so happy I finally got around to this. This really and truly lived up to so much of the hype and so much of the expectations I had for it. I feel like I should tell you what this is about. This is a science fiction fantasy that is placed in a world where there has been a lot of ecological devastation, and the world goes through the worlds and nations go through various seasons. That's why we have the fifth season here, and the fifth season is like a stage of, how many times can I say devastation? But it is a stage of destruction and upheaval, specifically with natural forces. And there are people who can control specifically like tectonic movements and a lot of like, I don't know a good way to describe it except like if you've seen Avatar: The Last Airbender or like Korra and you have Earthbenders, it's like that except a very intense version of it. And it was so good. This book was so good. It does one of my favorite things that I love, and that is second person perspective here. There were so many chapters that were starting with like, you are doing this, or you have done this. And I really loved that. I thought it was such a great storytelling device for In Here in particular. And I think that this did so much to set up the world, and it was so engaging. And I just was so interested in not only the characters, but the world building doesn't always get to me. And I'm going to talk a lot about it in this with just talking about this, but it was so interesting. I really wanted to know about this world, and that doesn't always happen to me. So I was so happy that it happened here, and I just loved it. And I can't wait to continue in the series. Okay, that's it. That's my December wrap up. Please feel free to do algorithm things down below. I hope you're having a great day, and I will see you next Friday. Please feel free to tell me in the comments what your favorite book of December was, or your least favorite, or just anything. I just want to hear about your opinions. Okay, bye.